Regardless of how you feel about Conor McGregor, the man has accomplished some impressive feats. From becoming the first person to successfully capture belts in 2 divisions, sorry BJ, to repeatedly resetting the bar of what we thought an MMA pay-per-view event was possible of. Conor McGregor had such a profound impact on MMA as a whole, we almost now universally refer to the post-2014 era of the UFC as the entertainment era, or the McGregor era. But as that era comes to a close, we have to ask ourselves the question, what legacy does Conor McGregor leave behind? Or more importantly, how will he be remembered? What's up guys, I'll try and keep this video brief and to the point, as I'll be doing a more in-depth look at McGregor's career at some point soon, especially going in depth over his early career and run at the featherweight title, and mainly why he gained so much hate over this period, so be sure to subscribe as you won't want to miss it. But back to the question at hand, how will McGregor be remembered? As a fighter's fighter, who took any challenge, dreamed big, and achieved bigger? As one of the all-time greats? Or as a controversial celebrity and entertainer who also had a fighting career? What defines the man more? The punch he landed on Aldo to win the featherweight crown in 2015? Or the ill-advised shot he threw against the old boy in the pub in 2019? I'd argue that would depend on what stage of Conor's career you started paying attention to. Whether you're a McGregor detractor or a superfan, your opinion of him is probably shaped by which era of McGregor you were introduced to. You've got the cocky yet motivated McGregor of the 2013 to early 2015 period, from his UFC debut leading up to his first booking with Aldo. You have the peak McGregor from 2015 till the end of 2016, which takes us from his first Aldo booking through his capturing of the featherweight title and culminating in the KO of Eddie Alvarez. This is where most people were introduced to McGregor, and virtually all of his now legendary soundbites come from. Next up, we have the holy shit McGregor of the 2017 through 2019, which takes us from the lead up to the Floyd Mayweather bout, through to his Khabib loss. This is the era that houses most of Conor's controversies, the era where most MMA fans, including myself, kind of forgot about McGregor as a legitimate fighter, and began to see him as a celebrity that fights. And then, last but not least, we have the recent, remotivated, humble McGregor, which carries us from the Cowboy Cerrone fight through to today. Each of these eras, or each of these McGregors, has helped to build or tarnish his overall legacy respectively. We won't touch too much on the early McGregor today, as I've previously said I would like to save that for a later video, and I would also imagine it's the McGregor that fewest people are familiar with and even less can remember. It's for this reason we will focus on the other 3. Peak McGregor is the McGregor most people are familiar with and most fans will remember the most fondly. During his 2015 to 2016 run, McGregor was on fire. Everything he touched turned to gold, every interview went viral. He was sharp and funny on the mic, while never crossing lines we'd repeatedly see him storm across in later years. And to cap it all out, he was giving us some of the most memorable moments in MMA history, from his press conferences to his in-the-cage performances. Say what you will about the Aldo fight, I personally think we should have seen it again, but regardless, no one can take away that performance in the Eddie Alvarez fight. I still believe to this day it is one of the finest performances I've ever seen from a title challenger. This was also more the fighter McGregor. In a short space of time, Conor had launched himself from an unknown to one of the most dominant forces in MMA history, and has secured himself a spot in the UFC Hall of Fame by becoming the first dual weight champion. If there was ever a time McGregor's legacy as one of the greats seemed secured, it was during this era. And then we have the fall. Before we jump into it, it's worth making a note of the character of Conor McGregor versus the man himself. As with arguably his biggest inspiration as far as his persona goes, Money Mayweather, we see a similar curve in Conor's public persona. What once started as a humble fighter became slowly cockier and more outrageous, creating the gimmicks that accelerated their respective careers. The easiest way to see this development in Conor's career would be to simply look at the build-up and post-fight interviews he gave in both his UFC 194 win against Aldo and his UFC 205 win against Alvarez. Both build-ups were particularly brutal, with Conor throwing trademark insults at both and questioning everything from the legitimacy of their resumes, their camps, and their skill sets. However, at UFC 194, in his Octagon interview, Conor drops the gimmick. And we see McGregor double down on his pre-fight comments, which to me personally began to signal the beginning of the end and his evolution into stage 3. The holy shit McGregor. Now to me, The holy shit McGregor is the McGregor that bought into his own hype and bought into his own gimmick. It appears that somewhere between the Alvarez fight and the Khabib fight, as McGregor's celebrity ballooned to unrivaled levels, McGregor forgot that his act was an act. This is also the McGregor to whom fighting applies the least. We saw McGregor competing in combat sports twice during this period, in his 2017 boxing match with Floyd Mayweather and his 2018 loss in MMA to Khabib Nurmagomedov. I'll gloss over the Mayweather match as fast as possible, as it isn't too relevant to our question at hand. While it's an important event in McGregor's career for sure, I don't think it has any bearings on his legacy. The beauty of competing in a sport outside your own, most people didn't give Conor a chance going into that fight. Save for a few McGregor diehards who were expecting him to knock Mayweather out in the first round. Glad you didn't put any money on that, right guys? Anyway, by making it an entertaining and somewhat competitive match, McGregor's stock was actually higher after the belt. However, it matters very little to how we view him in MMA. It did keep him away from the sport, however, and as time went on, the divide between McGregor and MMA grew. Across the time, McGregor had been away fighting Mayweather, a few Bellator officials and court cases. The UFC and the MMA world did what it has always done. Whenever a star appears or disappears, it kept on moving. By 2018, McGregor had become a second thought of the MMA community. Khabib and Tony Ferguson had corrected the course of the lightweight division. Max Holloway had cemented his place as the king of the 145-pound division. And this left McGregor in a tight spot. A man whose entire celebrity was based around his combat abilities had been stripped of both of his belts. His last win in MMA competition was nearing 2 years ago, and his last combat outing was a loss. Both divisions he had once reached the pinnacle of had moved on with new dominant champions and contenders. The only people left talking about McGregor as an entity in MMA tended to be his personal fanbase, as he increasingly fell out of favour with the MMA fanbase as a whole. At this point, McGregor would have to come back in a big way. And on August 3rd, 2018, it was announced he'd be fighting the man who secured the lightweight strap in his absence, Khabib Nurmagomedov. And that's where shit really hit the fan. To say the entire UFC 229 fiasco was catastrophic to McGregor's career would be an understatement. I won't get into it too deeply, there are other videos that cover the details better than I could here, I'll link a few below in the comments. But from the infamous dolly attack that left multiple fighters unable to compete due to lacerations, to the scathing personal attacks at the press conference that covered everything from family to religion, McGregor suddenly found himself being cut off from all but his hardcore fanbase, with the majority of the MMA community and the larger community as a whole just finding his antics too hard to stomach, believing he had gone far past a line that anyone, not even a fighter, should touch. And this reached eruption point in his one-sided loss to Nurmagomedov at UFC 229, in a slight twist of irony that can only be associated with McGregor's career. This was a loss that would actually impact his reputation with his hardcore fanbase far more than the wider MMA community. For those of us who follow MMA, this fight felt like a foregone conclusion. Khabib was a favourite going in, and for good reason. We'd seen him face fast, powerful strikers in the past, and the end was always the same. For the McGregor fanbase, the loss was more of a shock. Many still saw McGregor as a legitimate champion, and Khabib as an imposter who had taken his place. They believed McGregor would stroll back in, KO Khabib in the first, and just stroll off into the sunset as the greatest lightweight of all time. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. This loss, probably more than any other, killed Conor's chances of being remembered as the GOAT. Had Conor returned to KO Khabib in emphatic style, he would have instantly been catapulted to both. And with it, the other holes in his resume started to become increasingly bad. His inactivity, his lack of title defences. And I believe it's all this that led us into the third McGregor. After a relatively quiet period, excluding a few more McGregor court cases, we begin to see McGregor re-emerge, which leads us to our last era, the current era, the humble and remotivated McGregor. Starting with the cowboy fight, and remaining consistent in all of his media appearances since, and all the way through to his most recent loss to Dustin Poirier, Conor has returned to a toned down version of his original persona. The separation from the man and the character are more clear than ever, and even his cockiness is draped in respect or devoid from any real venom. Whether you're cynical and believe that this shift is purely down to an attempt at damage control, or if you truly believe that he has been humbled and has been sobered by the reality of his loss and his rampant persona, and reconnected with the man who got him to the UFC in the first place, it's irrelevant. This appears to be the McGregor that's here to stay for now, and I'm personally fine with that. Whether it's an act or not, I think we're currently seeing a version of McGregor that most MMA fans knew was there in the early days and have been longing for him to get back to. And if we are slowly seeing an end to the McGregor era as a whole, it's the best impression he could leave on MMA fans and the larger world as a whole. As far as his in-cage career, Conor has traded wins and losses since his return against Cowboy, finishing Cowboy in the first round and then being finished in the second round of his 2021 rematch with Dustin Poirier. While being far from done, it's now only McGregor's stardom that's keeping him in any kind of orbit of the title. But now that we're up to date, let's revisit the question at the start of our video. How will Conor McGregor be remembered? With this most recent loss, I think it's fair to say McGregor being remembered as the GOAT, or even being in contention for the title of GOAT, is long gone. Even if McGregor was to go on another whirlwind run, recapture the lightweight gold, and even successfully defend it, the blemishes on his record are now too big, too public, and too decisive for him to enter the GOAT conversation alongside the likes of GSP, John Jones, and Demetrious Johnson. That isn't to say though, McGregor will not be remembered as a champion and as an all-time great. His achievement in capturing the featherweight and lightweight belts simultaneously alone will surely have reserved him a spot in the Hall of Fame, alongside his numerous pay-per-view sales. But I suspect it's that these kind of records that will always eclipse Conor's fight career. For better or worse, I believe it's Conor's antics, personality and celebrity that will What do you think? In 10 to 20 years time, when the gloves have long been hung up for the last time, how do you think McGregor will be remembered? How will you remember McGregor? Let me know in the comments, guys. Thank you if you're still watching. If you'd like to see a longer version of this video where I flesh everything out a bit more, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, guys, be sure to subscribe and I'll catch you on the next one.